KCAA, the Inland Talk Express.
Thank you for tuning in for this edition of Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali. I am attorney Zulu Ali with the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Andrea Roderman. This week, like every week, we'll be discussing critical legal and social justice issues that are impacting our community. This week, our subject matter actually is how to cope. Suicide, depression, social media, and injustice. So last week we kind of ended off talking a little bit about social media, and also we did speak a little bit about the issue of suicide and other issues, especially mental trauma issues. And I think it's one of those topics that we treat it when it comes to our discussion in these formats and these forums the same way we actually treat them in reality. Is very seldom are these issues actually addressed. It's actually an issue that in our criminal justice system and our system in general that we deal with this issue on a daily basis. And I see it firsthand where you have mental trauma is one of those issues that's really taboo to speak about. I mean, I think that earlier we probably had just as many mental and psychosis and trauma 20, 30, 40, 50, hundreds of years ago. However, we really didn't really address it because it's a taboo subject. I think that we have, as traditionally, when it comes to mental issues as men, those are things that, that's a sign of weakness. And also a sign of, something is wrong with you if you have some sort of mental issue or some sort of trauma, or, it's one of those things that we really don't like to talk about. I think that the people who are suffering from mental depression, people who are suffering from suicidal thoughts, are much higher than they are actually revealed in real time. It's just something that everybody puts on a face, and it's one of those things that we typically don't talk about in our society, and to be quite honest with you, in really any society. And that's it. It is what it is. Identifying with it, I think on a daily basis, I think that we live in a time where people, have a very difficult time of coping. That's the reason why motivational videos and things to motivational talk and all those things are very prevalent, because, people, have a hard time with dealing with the daily grind that we deal with. I mean, it's difficult. And most people put on a face, and they don't really address really what's going on with them. And oftentimes it's too late, but it also causes other problems, other diseases, there's some physical repercussions of mental disorders as well. I know this is, we try to keep it within the justice realm when we talk about almost any of our topics. And I think for me, and I'm not a psychologist or mental health expert, but I do deal with people on a daily basis within the system who are dealing with these issues. And and I know that doing assessments, and I know doing, referring individuals to mental health counseling, and referring individuals to different things as far as their mental issues are concerned, that um you know they say that, and we looked at the numbers, and let's just think about this. So from the ages of 15, according to the and our source would be the Department of Justice, I believe, is where I got this most recent statistic. um it says that 15 to 24, in the ages of 15 to 24, this is for African Americans, that basically it was a second, suicide was the second leading cause of death,
Mm.
right? And for and it's up 47% for out, and this is around 2019, the statistic that I'm looking at. And then the 60% when it comes to black females who have actually, and within that age group, and it has surpassed that of white females as far as suicide rates for black females. Is that from outside?
Mm-hmm.
And so also I'm looking at the Bureau of Justice statistics. It says that 56% of state prisoners and 56% of state prisoners and 64% of jail inmates have had a mental health issue, right? And so what's interesting about when we think about mental health, and we tend to think about it from the what causes an individual to commit certain criminal acts, right? So in other words, what is it that caused the perpetrator, or is there some sort of mental issue that caused the perpetrator? Were they suffering from some sort of, mood or anxiety disorder, or some sort of psychosis? But what's interesting is that we often forget that many perpetrators were victims of crime,
Mm.
right? And so, and I think that that's the problem that we often, like, for example, when people are committing violence, or for example, you know, many people who perpetrate domestic violence actually been victims of some sort of violence themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you are come from a household where there's domestic violence, you're more likely to perpetrate that because you've dealt with it. Or children who are exposed to certain types of violence are more likely to commit violence. I mean, I think there are statistics that would support that. Um, and so the question is going to be, how do we deal with it? And I'm going to say right off of the top, instead of going, no, going to the bottom of the hour or at the end of the hour and saying that basically we need to recognize it more. And when I say recognize it, recognize the fact that we should, pay more attention and be a little bit more um, um, knowledgeable and address these issues a lot more than we have in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that one of the things that we have to do is we ultimately are going to have to learn as a society, how do you cope with that? If you are suffering, and let's talk about depression for a minute.
Mm.
Um I mean, how do we need to how and one the subject is coping. How do you cope? Because obviously the show can be an entire show of identifying depression and suicide and
Mm-hmm.
statistics and how it impacts the criminal justice system. But the bigger issue is, how do we teach people, or how do we help people cope with their depression? How do we help people to cope with thoughts of suicide? How do we help people deal, with this type of trauma? Um, and it's interesting, in my job, that I deal with people on a daily basis that are at the very lowest of low of what they're dealing with. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
in other words, whether it's a family issue or whether there's a criminal issue that they're dealing with. I mean, when they speak to me, they don't necessarily speak to me about what's going on within, whatever's happening legally. They talk about what's really happening and what they're going with, and the depression, and it's an extremely difficult time for people. And so I get an opportunity to talk with people, and much of what I try to do when I'm speaking with people who are dealing with these things, and I figure out ways to, what is a coping mechanism. I know a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people go to psychologists and psychiatrists, which I'm not, to deal with that. But I think that a lot of what you're dealing with, when you listen to people like Les Brown,
Yeah.
when you listen to people like many of these other people who are motivational speakers, they are, in essence, if you really look at what they're really talking about, they're really talking about how to overcome the crisis and the problems that you deal with on a daily basis,
Mhm.
right? I mean, and that's I mean, in life, ultimately, there's always going to be problems and setbacks, right? I mean,
Mhm.
everybody, and that's the reason why, um, religion and faith is such a big issue for many people, and oftentimes that's where people find their peace. They find their peace in their religion, and they find their peace in faith.
Mhm.
Anxiety disorder is a huge issue. It's one of the number one issues, is the anxiety that people feel on a daily basis about the constant unknown. There's so many things that go bad in people's life that they can hardly even deal with the day by day and be positive, because so many bad things
Yeah.
happen to them in their life.
Yep.
So it's hard for them to maintain that faith. It's like, what's next? This
Hmm.
is going wrong for me. Then, that's the anxiety. So you're almost anticipate bad things happening to you,
Mhm.
because bad things constantly always go wrong, right? What can go wrong will go wrong, and people deal with that on a really daily basis.
Yeah.
And so, then the question is, how do you cope? How do you deal with this anxiety? So much so that some people feel like that they cannot even get up. And I've heard people say, I can't even get up in the morning. I don't even want to see tomorrow because today is so bad. How do I just deal with it? I'm just so sick and tired of
Yeah.
so many bad things happening that I just don't even want to see tomorrow. I'm through with this. You know what I mean? If I don't wake up tomorrow, I really don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
But at any rate, we'll continue with this discussion on the other side of the break. Please do not touch that down.
Do you have a great idea for a radio show but have no idea where to start? Or have you been hosting a podcast for a while and want to take it to the next level? If so, you need the Gab Radio Network. To host a show on the Gab Radio Network, all you need is your voice, and we'll handle the rest, from technical engineering to full service audio production and much more. Every show on the Gab Radio Network can be heard on our station on the TuneIn Radio app. Plus, we put all of our shows on our satellite, which is accessed by over 5,500 stations. And here's the best part. You can host from anywhere you want. There are many means to connect to the Gab Radio Network remotely, and our staff of highly trained engineers and producers will make you sound like you're right here in studio. So, if you want to be on the Gab Radio Network, the same network that hosts the Small Business Advocate, Radio MD, and the Federalist, send an email right now to sales@gabradionetwork.com. That's sales@gabradionetwork.com.
Nubian Pictures presents a CCM Films production documentary entitled Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. This emotional and strong documentary tells the story of African-American lawyer Zulu Ali seeking justice and his purpose as a lawyer while crossing paths with Araceli, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico who is seeking her freedom. Together, they help discover their purpose and freedom in each other. Watch this incredible film today from iTunes Movies, YouTube Movies, Amazon Prime, and Google Play Movies. Learn about the cast and crew, links to purchase, and more at purposeandfreedommovie.com. Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. Available now. Rated G.
I did not feel safe. That's why I decided to come to California, because I didn't feel safe in Mexico.
It's kind of like the system. And if you go outside the system, then it becomes a struggle.
Are you an immigrant seeking defense representation and are looking to protect your rights? Or maybe someone who is experiencing an injustice or discrimination and need a lawyer you can trust? Well, that's exactly why you need the help of award-winning trial lawyer Zulu Ali. The law offices of Zulu Ali provides immigration defense representation for those seeking justice and looking to protect their rights. If you or a loved one needs professional legal advice and representation, then contact Zulu Ali. Zulu Ali's firm focuses on criminal law, family law, civil and personal injury, and international law. Zulu Ali is a former police officer and U.S. Marine, so you know you're in good hands. Serving all of California and immigration cases nationwide, representing victims and suspects at the International Criminal Court at The Hague. Call Zulu Ali today at 888-682-3049 or visit ZuluAliLaw.com.
Welcome back to Justice Watch. In Justice Watch crew, we're continuing with our discussion. Uh, hope, suicide, depression, social media, and before I went to the break, I was kind of setting the stage for what our focus is going to be with regards to this topic, and that is going to be how to cope. Because I don't want it to be an hour of us just discussing about, suicide, depression, social, how all that plays into injustice. Because we know that there's there's not really much that we can get out of that. Because I don't think that's something that I have to necessarily sell to a lot of people. And to the extent that it's going to change something, I'm not quite sure. But what I do want to do is I just want to address the issue about how do we, cope with, the daily grind that people go through and where depression, really, comes from. I mean, it's a huge issue. That's the reason why. And I talked about Les Brown, and there's many, many others who do motivational speeches, and what's the brother that does it all the time?
Eric Thomas.
Yeah, Eric Thomas. And they're very much sought after. You watch the videos that they have. I mean, it's a very a big industry. And it's not, the motivation is not, at least from my perspective, it's not necessarily, because you hear the talk, the way that they address it, and they all begin with the same issue about where they were in their lives and what they went with. How do you go through the daily struggle and the daily grind? And if you listen to most of them, they're going to give you a scenario where it makes you understand that is where everybody is. Everybody has been in that space where, life becomes challenging. No matter where you are in your life, there are people at every level who, I mean, we see it. For example, when they talk about billionaires that try to commit suicide, or millionaires that try to commit suicide, and we see the depression and struggle that people have regardless of their situation. They're depressed because it's a daily struggle. If it's not, as they used to always say, if it ain't one thing, it's another.
Yeah.
Right? And it's always something that's going, and that's a hard thing to do, just getting through. And then we listen about these like, I know that when I was, and we talked about religion and then we talked about faith, and the reason why faith is such a people gravitate to it, because in many ways it would be difficult for me to be able to give anybody any advice about the anxiety that people as human beings experience on a daily basis if I didn't address the issue of faith.
Yeah.
Because I mean, because there is no guarantees, right? Because if everything is going right for you in your mind, and if you think that everything is not, nothing will go wrong, then I think you become reckless, right? But if you also are paralyzed by your daily activity because of what you think will go wrong, then you also can create destruction, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, this is not a religious show, right? And I'm not advocating for any type of religion or anything like that. But how are you going to be able to deal with the daily grind of all, like, for example, we saw it, like, for example, nobody was expecting the pandemic. The issue of suicide went up during the pandemic. The people were having financial issues during the pandemic.
Yeah.
There were issues with family issues, such as marriages, issues going through the pandemic. So we saw all of that, and these are things that people didn't expect.
Yeah.
Right. And when you hit that situation, like in 2019 is where you start seeing this increase, which bled over to 2020. There was an increase in depression. There was an increase in suicide. There was an increase in all of these things that we were, that we were experiencing. Um, and so the question, and it goes back. So again, everybody deals with some level of that struggle, right? Nobody is exempt from it.
Yeah.
We don't want to think that. We want to put on the face like we do on social media that nothing, like, look at me, look what I have. Look at where I'm at, look at what I'm eating, look at where I'm going, because it in many ways it actually plays into trying to deal with your depression.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you're able to have a certain, it makes you have a certain type of life if you're able to let people see that things are going a certain way, right? It helps people, and people live on that, and people live there, and it helps their, sometimes it helps it helps their depression, I guess, or it makes it worse. And so, but the reality of it is that we life is that process. It's that, there has to be, there's, I mean, when I sit there and I think about some of my, like, you sit there and you look, and I'm thinking about one entertainer in general, and very, very successful. But I know, when I say successful, I'm talking about financial and whatever. And then you look and see what happens in their life when it comes to their family. You can't control nobody else. You know what I mean? So the reality of it is no matter how great, you may be, there's always this thing that's going to come up that's going to hit people. And, and that's where the depression comes from.
Yeah.
And how do we cope with that every day? And my advice to people, and the one thing that I can only tell people is, is the faith aspect of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you don't, you have to, because I know it's difficult for people, and I find it because I know there's so many people so negative.
Yeah.
And everybody I deal with in my business, it's like this, like they're waiting for something to happen, and they're thinking the worst, and they're impatient and don't want to go, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And all I can do is I tell them, hey man, you're going to have some degree of faith.
Yeah. It's a trip, because as a man, like you said at the beginning, is that we don't want to look at depression because we figure it's a sign of weakness. And see, for a long time, I knew that something existed, but I backed away from it. No, I can handle this. I'm not going to never fold up under this pressure of life. I got this. And I told myself that for many years, but ultimately, I one day came to find out that depression is real. In fact, I even got on social media and I blasted on social media and said depression is real. It's because that was the day that it was my awakening to understand my own shortcomings and my own, like, I sat back and I'm like, man, I'm going through this terrible time, man. But how do I deal with it? And that was I can go back to a time where I was driving down the freeway and I was going to sleep, and I was throwing water on my face to stay woke, just to keep me woke. Well, depression was like that to me when I was going through those periods and times where I thought, man, I was going to fall short. I would turn on that ET early in the morning. I mean, I would literally wake up to motivational speaking every morning. I would blast it around the house while the kids was going to school, and I would listen to this dude, and this dude would pump me up and get me going. And I go out and I'll make these little business transactions, but that's what kept me going. But the thing about it was, for many years, I ignored it because I didn't recognize it.
Right.
And I think a lot of us ignore it because and there's a way of coping with it, but you just have to find that way of coping with it. Like you say, it could be faith. It could be just the person that's motivating you. It could be somebody in your life. I look at my kids sometimes and I like, man, I got to get through for them.
Right.
So.
That's true, man. And what's interesting is that, it's not an anomaly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's life.
Yeah, it is.
You know what I mean? But at any rate, please do not touch that dial. We'll be back with more on Justice Watch.
Need some get back.
There's a new nationally syndicated radio program that's sweeping the nation, and you don't want to miss it. Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali, the voice of justice for the people. The focus of Justice Watch is to provide an honest analysis and viable solutions to the criminal and social justice crisis in America and the world from a Black, brown, working class, and socially disadvantaged perspective, and to motivate listeners to be informed and part of the solution. Zulu Ali is joined by the Justice Crew, consisting of Rosa Nunez, Michael Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Charito Ali to tackle the most pressing issues. Host attorney Zulu Ali is a former police officer, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, and an award-winning trial lawyer who focuses on representing persons accused of crimes, immigrants, victims of discrimination, and persons seeking civil justice. Find out how to listen to Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali at justicewatchradio.com. Nubian Pictures presents a CCM Films production documentary entitled Purpose and Freedom. Keep Your Hand on the Plow. This emotional and strong documentary tells the story of African-American lawyer Zulu Ali seeking justice and his purpose as a lawyer while crossing paths with Araceli, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico who is seeking her freedom. Together, they help discover their purpose and freedom in each other. Watch this incredible film today from iTunes Movies, YouTube Movies, Amazon Prime, and Google Play Movies. Learn about the cast and crew, links to purchase, and more at purposeandfreedommovie.com. Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. Available now. Rated G.
I did not feel safe. That's why I decided to come to California, because I didn't feel safe in Mexico.
It's kind of like the system, and if you go outside the system, then it becomes a struggle.
Are you an immigrant seeking defense representation and are looking to protect your rights? Or maybe someone who is experiencing an injustice or discrimination and need a lawyer you can trust? Well, that's exactly why you need the help of award-winning trial lawyer Zulu Ali. The law offices of Zulu Ali provides immigration defense representation for those seeking justice and looking to protect their rights. If you or a loved one needs professional legal advice and representation, then contact Zulu Ali. Zulu Ali's firm focuses on criminal law, family law, civil and personal injury, and international law. Zulu Ali is a former police officer and U.S. Marine, so you know you're in good hands. Serving all of California and immigration cases nationwide, representing victims and suspects at the International Criminal Court at The Hague. Call Zulu Ali today at 888-682-3049 or visit ZuluAliLaw.com.
Welcome back to Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali and the Justice Watch crew, where we're continuing on our discussion with how to cope, suicide, depression, social media, and injustice. And before we went to the break, actually, we were actually speaking about the commonality of it. I mean, because everybody that goes through it actually probably feels like they're going through it by themselves. Mm-hmm. But I mean, everybody has those moments. I mean, when you look at the stories of success, I always say success stories always look the same.
Yeah.
There's always a period of struggle,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, even in the most successful, it's like it's the same story.
Yeah.
And you see how they come through this, this process of just going through, these dire moments. But at some point in time, even though they're going through this dire moment, there's this faith and there's this understanding that sometimes that's the process. What makes depression worse for most people is that they feel like they're the only ones that are going through
Correct.
it. And I know that when I speak, and it's funny because when I speak to people, that I'm representing that are going through some really terrible times and, can't understand why this is happening to them, I try to remind them that, that I just came from somebody that's going through something that's much worse than what you're going through. You just don't recognize that what you're going through is not as bad as you think it is. You know what I mean? And sometimes, and that's the thing, is it's amazing how bad your situation feels at the moment when there's so much worse.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, man, this is, this is so bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Especially when you sit there and you think about, I know that I have people who are on the inside
Hmm.
that are listening to us, because I know there's people who are
Hmm.
incarcerated, and I know that they listen to our show, and so there's a silver lining in everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And at that moment, it's amazing. uh I talked to people who were incarcerated that I helped, and then they get out of incarceration, right?
Hmm.
And now I was in court the other day with someone that when I met them, they were in immigration detention. And they stayed in immigration detention for 2 years.
Hmm.
Now we get them out of immigration detention, and now we're going through this process of where we're trying to, help with their immigration status by getting rid of a conviction that they have. And then they were crying because the process is taking a long time, and they're kind of depressed about where she is right now.
Hmm.
But I reminded her, do you know where you were when I met you?
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You were getting ready to be sent out of the country to a place you don't even know how to speak Spanish, right?
Yeah.
And now you were getting ready to be deported. And this is all you're dealing with right now. You're depressed and you're crying. You see how we are? You
Hmm.
see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and that's kind of the situation, is that it's so everything can be, and sometimes bad situations are brought to you so that you can understand the greatness of your current circumstances.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a trip because my wife told me that one day. I was sitting up there. She knows that when I go through those moments, I get real silent. And she simply walked up to me. She says, "But have you ever realized that we ain't never been without?"
Hmm. Right.
It was just those words. We ain't
Hmm.
never been without.
Right.
We can cry all we want. We can stress about financial matters and stuff like that. But she said, we ain't never been without.
Hmm.
And that was just enough to, push me on,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. And that's another thing about social media. Now I'm going to go to you guys, but that's the thing about social media, is that unless there was someone looking at you, really, really, would it really be that bad?
Mm,
Because the majority of what we do are we look for somebody else's approval,
mm,
right?
yeah.
Why would you have? I mean, for example, what if what if you got a Rolls Royce and something happened and it looked like you were getting and you were living somewhere really nice in Calabasas,
Mm,
and something was getting ready to happen to you, and you was getting ready to lose that Rolls Royce and that house in Calabasas, right?
mm,
What would really be the impact of you losing that? The real impact would
mm,
be, it wouldn't be you,
yeah.
it would be people's perception of you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what's the difference between living in a studio and living in a mansion,
Yeah. Correct.
right? The only difference is what people see,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
If nobody sees your mansion, right?
Hmm.
Does it matter whether you live in a mansion or a studio?
Oh,
You see what I'm saying? I mean, we have to be real. I mean, a lot of what we do is for the way it looks. Most of what we have, we don't even need,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, and sometimes we just, the reason why we have so much is primarily to floss.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, except when you ride in first class, because it's really nice up there. But at any rate, I'm just joking. No, it is nice up there. All right. So, what say you? Who wants to go next?
What I was going to say was when you were talking about how what your wife told you, sometimes it does just take a change of perspective. One thing that I can share from my youth when I was going through my bout with depression, and it got really bad. And when we're talking about coping, we probably should say positive ways to cope, because sometimes people use negative things to cope, like they want to, drinking, smoking, promiscuity, all kind of craziness and stuff. And I used to write, do my music, do poetry, draw, things that were creative. And then but I was still pushing myself to the back, And one day, the writing stopped helping, the poetry stopped helping, all the things that I was doing to be creative, to kind of keep my mind preoccupied from addressing the issue, it wasn't working anymore. And it's really important that people understand the seriousness of depression and talking to people, saying, hey, I'm going through this. Even until you can find a therapist, hey, someone that you trust. You can't be silent, because depression is a silent killer. People are going through so much stuff internally, and you don't know a lot of times unless somebody says something about it. And that's huge. You have to do it. And one thing I will also say is practicing gratitude. It took a long time, because at one point I was like, everything's bad. There's nothing. I'm not grateful for nothing. And then I started with like the small things. Like one day, and when I say small things, I was thanking God for the Martin show, because it made me laugh. Like that's what I started at those little small things. And then thank you for the air I can breathe. Like you have to learn to be grateful in those small things, and it'll change your perspective. We all go through trouble. We all do. It's just about how we process it, how we view it. And that makes all the bit of difference. But I will say, talking to somebody is so important. It's so important, because that mental torment can really mess you up.
Yeah. Well, it depends on who you talk to. Make sure you talk to the right person. Because when you say that, sometimes it's negative, because sometimes you can talk to somebody that's going to take you to the wrong place, whether it's through a lower place. Sometimes through drugs, and sometimes through, and that's another thing that as human beings, sometimes it's where we feel like that people sometimes, and I've heard people say this. They say, sometimes I think this person wants to see you struggle.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Or they don't want you to see doing better than they're doing. Yeah. Right. And then basically when, some people, kind of, wallow in your, problems. Yeah. And sometimes that's why we try to keep that face, because we don't want someone else, because that's how we do. That's why we don't, it's like, the Joneses, how we used to always call the Joneses. We don't want the Joneses to know that, we ain't doing right over here. Correct. You know what I'm saying? So we kind of don't want people to say that, you know what I mean? But the reality, of course, is that, your faith has to be in the right place. And for everybody, that's different, but faith is really important. And sometimes I think in order to be able to grind these things out, is ultimately you have to be comfortable doing it alone at some point. Yeah. And the reason why I say that's why faith helps me so much is because, depending on what faith you have, because when you have faith in someone else, then sometimes they can cause you depression. You see what I'm saying? Like if your entire life is in this one, that's where most of it starts. Like I had all this faith in this one person. This was my rider. Yep. And when that rider does something to you, then it goes right into, you see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But that's where that faith issue comes in, is those moments. I don't know whether it's what's that Russell Simmons does? What is it? What does Russell Simmons do? You know what I'm talking about? Yoga. Whatever you got to do, you got to figure out that mechanism, prayer, whatever it is, where you can have that moment and you can, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That's the difference between religion and spirituality.
Yeah. All right. We'll be back on the other side of the break with Justice Watch.
There's a new nationally syndicated radio program that's sweeping the nation, and you don't want to miss it. Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali, the voice of justice for the people. The focus of Justice Watch is to provide an honest analysis and viable solutions to the criminal and social justice crisis in America and the world from a black, brown, working class, and socially disadvantaged perspective, and to motivate listeners to be informed and part of the solution. Zulu Ali is joined by the Justice Crew, consisting of Rosa Nunez, Michael Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Charito Ali to tackle the most pressing issues. Host attorney Zulu Ali is a former police officer, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, and an award-winning trial lawyer who focuses on representing persons accused of crimes, immigrants, victims of discrimination, and persons seeking civil justice. Find out how to listen to Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali at justicewatchradio.com. Nubian Pictures presents a CCM Films production documentary entitled Purpose and Freedom. Keep Your Hand on the Plow. This emotional and strong documentary tells the story of African-American lawyer Zulu Ali seeking justice and his purpose as a lawyer while crossing paths with Araceli, an undocumented immigrant from Mexico who is seeking her freedom. Together, they help discover their purpose and freedom in each other. Watch this incredible film today from iTunes Movies, YouTube Movies, Amazon Prime, and Google Play Movies. Learn about the cast and crew, links to purchase, and more at purposeandfreedommovie.com. Purpose and Freedom. Keep your hand on the plow. Available now. Rated G.
I did not feel safe. That's why I decided to come to California, because I didn't feel safe in Mexico.
It's kind of like the system, and if you go outside the system, then it becomes a struggle.
Are you an immigrant seeking defense representation and are looking to protect your rights? Or maybe someone who is experiencing an injustice or discrimination and need a lawyer you can trust? Well, that's exactly why you need the help of award-winning trial lawyer Zulu Ali. The law offices of Zulu Ali provides immigration defense representation for those seeking justice and looking to protect their rights. If you or a loved one needs professional legal advice and representation, then contact Zulu Ali. Zulu Ali's firm focuses on criminal law, family law, civil and personal injury, and international law. Zulu Ali is a former police officer and U.S. Marine, so you know you're in good hands, serving all of California and immigration cases nationwide, representing victims and suspects at the International Criminal Court at The Hague. Call Zulu Ali today at 888-682-3049 or visit ZuluAliLaw.com.
Welcome back to Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali and the Justice Watch crew, where we're continuing with our discussion on how to cope, suicide, depression, social media, and injustice. So we're going to go to Rosa next. What say you, Rosa? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, awesome.
No, I can't hear you.
I can't hear you, Rosa.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
better.
Better.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Sadly, I would say sadly we live in a culture that really condemns failures, and being depressed or being mentally ill is something that is seen as a failure. And I think that for myself, I have become really comfortable with failure. Sadly, we live in a society that doesn't and is not comfortable with failure. Failure is condemned. And I think that's something that in order to be able to get through these tough times is realizing everyone fails, and this failure of mine, I'm comfortable with it because I'm going to learn something, as opposed to seeing it as something that defines you as an individual and truly kind of makes you seem like you are a person who is not successful. A lot of the people that make it out there are successful because they were comfortable with failing. They became so comfortable with failing that they learned so much that they're able to succeed. So that's my opinion in terms of dealing with tough times. We all have them, but it's really becoming comfortable with that aspect of life and knowing that everyone goes through it, but not everyone is strong enough to put themselves out there and let everybody know, hey, I'm dealing with this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the whole thing about you do have to treat your the success as like like your failures. You
Yeah.
keep treat them the same, and that's why we go back to the whole when we listen to motivational speech.
Yeah.
I mean, and so I think that's the reason why it's so popular. That's the reason why we know that it's so common. And people, why would so many people, why would these people be so successful that are able to motivate people?
Mhm.
And when they talk about that, that's what they talk. The whole point of motivation is overcoming failure.
Yeah.
That's the majority of the time when you're listening to a motivational speech. That is that is pretty much the context of it is dealing with the fact that as human beings, you know, it's always gonna, and the reality of it is we always look at the next person and assume that that person is doing, why are they getting this
Yeah.
and I'm getting that.
Correct.
And you just, and sometimes you just don't know what's happening, you know, in that person's life. It
Mhm.
just, you just think that that person is, you know, doing great.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So true.
You know, and I've ran into that before where people say, "Man, I'm a good-hearted person, man. I'm a religious person. I do all of this and I do it." And this joke over here got all this crap going on there. Why they so successful and I'm not?
Right.
And I've heard that.
Yeah.
And you know, it brings me to a point where I remember once someone once said, "Well, you know, when you reach those points, you have to go to a therapist. You have to, you know, go to somebody that can talk to you." And I've always been against that. Now, I mean, everybody has things that they do, okay, but I've always been against it because every time I see a therapist, it's always somebody sitting you in the chair and talking to you like, how do we do this or how do we do that? You know, and that was depressing within itself for me. I want somebody that's going to ignite my soul,
Right.
you know, with this motivational speaker and yell at
Right.
me and tell me, okay, you got to get up off your butt. Let's go. You need to go. That's the type of stuff that I
Yeah.
want. I don't want nobody sitting there saying, well, okay, you got to do it this way. And I was always against that. Now, like I say, it's different things work for different people. And I think when it comes to depression, you have to find what brings you the most joy. You have to find something that brings you out of that hole, out of that dark hole, and push you back out or thrust you back out into life to do better. And every day that I see my kids, that's what thrusts me now.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, I mean, and one of the things is that I think that what happens is that we have to address the commonality of depression. Like when they give these numbers, like they say a certain percentage is this or a certain percentage of
Mhm.
that. I think that, you know, and how things are defined.
Mhm.
Because I think that basically, if you make it a common issue, then I think coping with it is a lot different. Because you can take someone who is going through something, you can medicate them,
Yeah.
you can, you know, have them going to certain, you know, like you said, therapy, and you know, and making someone think that something is wrong with them.
Mhm.
But the reality of it is that if you are depressed, there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
Yeah.
You see, that's the whole
Correct.
point. There's nothing, and that's why, you know, we feel. I mean, and I think that's really the thing is that we have to understand that going through, you know, daily struggles is, you know,
Life.
part of life.
Yeah.
I mean, I called home the last 2 weeks to speak to someone back at home, and it's like, man, I'm going to another funeral. You know,
Mhm.
so and so died, or so and so died, or this person has died. I mean, you know, that is the part of life is that there are going to be things that aren't going to go your way,
Yeah.
and just dealing with human beings. You know what I mean? That's the thing that's the hardest. One of the hardest parts of life is just dealing with people,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
It's just
Yeah.
that people are so miserable that they go out of their way to make you miserable.
Mhm.
Like everybody wants to take. I feel like that some way. Maybe, and that's my psychosis.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes it's like if someone tells me of some bad stuff, I go. I like certain energy.
Mhm.
So when I'm around someone, I like people who take the energy and use it as a way to, you know, like this has happened, but this is how we're gonna fix it. But
Yeah.
some people like everything that happens, it's like they're always trying to give you bad news.
Yeah.
It's like they
Wow.
waddle in
Mhm.
your misery.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like I heard this about what you call it. You know, like, hey, so and so got married. Yeah, but I heard he this doing this. So I heard he doing.
Mhm.
It's like
Mhm.
really, you know what I'm saying? It's like everything that happens is always something negative
Yeah.
that goes along with it. and everybody is like, trying to uphold this, this image. But I mean, I just think that, man, I think energy is a lot. I feed off of people's energy, and sometimes I've learned from one of my downfalls is that, sometimes you need to kick bad energy away.
Yeah.
You have to let go of it. You know what I mean? You got to say, you know what, I just don't want to deal with that. Or when you have that project, right? And you come to, the person with the project, like, hey man, I'm getting ready to do X, Y, and Z, or I heard, I'm looking forward to this. And then when you ever heard this one, you doing too much.
Yes. Yes. Oh my God. Yes, I just heard.
Oh my God. I mean, I'm like, I'm doing too much.
Right.
And then now all of a sudden you worried about my health because I'm trying to do something instead of, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes you bad because you bring something to somebody that you think believes in you.
Correct.
And then they shoot you down what you're trying to do.
Exactly.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that bothers me. You know what I mean? And so sometimes, they always say, don't tell your big dreams to small-minded people.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean?
True.
Because they're going to always say, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, when I moved out here to California from Tennessee, and I said, I'm going to bring me, my mother, my wife, and my 4 kids to go to law school. What? You can't do that.
How are you gonna do that?
You know what I'm saying? How you gonna do that?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And and so it demotivates you, as opposed to saying, hey man, you know what? I had a friend of mine says, man, you know what, if I could pay for you to do that, I'd pay for it because you're gonna be a great lawyer. I'll do whatever I can. Let me know. Yeah. Right. Those are that's the energy that you have to deal with. And sometimes you have to surround yourself with, that kind of energy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But see, a lot of times it be those things that the individuals go through that make them more depressed by seeing your success.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Wow, we done ran out of time. Ain't that something?
Yeah.
Well, I thank everybody for tuning in for this edition of Justice Watch. We'll see you next week, same time, same place, same channel. And until that time, stay motivated and stay blessed.
There's a new nationally syndicated radio program that's sweeping the nation, and you don't want to miss it. Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali, the voice of justice for the people. The focus of Justice Watch is to provide an honest analysis and viable solutions to the criminal and social justice crisis in America and the world from a black, brown, working class, and socially disadvantaged perspective, and to motivate listeners to be informed and part of the solution. Zulu Ali is joined by the Justice Crew, consisting of Rosa Nunez, Michael Clark, Dr. Akil Bashir, and Charito Ali to tackle the most pressing issues. Host attorney Zulu Ali is a former police officer, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, and an award-winning trial lawyer who focuses on representing persons accused of crimes, immigrants, victims of discrimination, and persons seeking civil justice. Find out how to listen to Justice Watch with attorney Zulu Ali at justicewatchradio.com.
You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda, 1050 AM, the station that leaves no listener behind.
You're listening to an encore presentation of this program, KCAA, the Inland Talk Express.
The views and opinions expressed by individuals on the following program do not necessarily reflect those of the network, Guys Guy Radio, and its platforms.
It's Guys Guy Radio. Here's your host, Robert Manny.
Welcome to Guys Radio. This is your host, Robert Manny, welcoming you to the show where men and women can be at their best and everyone wins. Guys Radio. We're here to inform you, inspire you, empower you, and get you to think, feel, and who knows, maybe even act by virtue of the journeys, stories, experiences, and insights of the guests I bring you each and every week to the show. And once again, this week is no different. We've got a terrific guest returning Guys Guy, coming back to Guys Radio, and we're going to talk about dreams and nightmares. And this past year has been a dream and a nightmare, hasn't it? As have the last 3 years. So we're going to get into a lot of the symbolisms, the recurring nightmares. We're going to get into also just basic dream symbolism also. My special guest returned to Guys Radio. His name is J.M. DeBoard. His new book is called Nightmares, Your Guide to Interpreting Your Darkest Dreams. You might know him from his, he leads the dream practice, if you will, on reddit.com. And he also wrote the Dream Interpretation Dictionary, Symbols, Signs, and Meanings, demystifying kind of the world of dreams and the dream symbols. And it's interesting with dreams because a lot of times their meanings are contrary to what you would expect. One of the things I really like about JM is that he works with people in terms of dream interpretation to help them enable them to be able to interpret their own dreams, because every dream and every symbol is different, and a lot of it is about context. We're going to get into all of that. What we have to do individually is work on ourselves. You want to fix the planet? Fix yourself. You want to fix your relationships? Fix yourself. You want to fix your life and everything that goes around you? Fix yourself. So the more time you can spend working on yourself, the better off things will be for you and everybody else. And I think that was one of the lessons and the gifts, if you will, forgive me, but coming out of the pandemic was that people had the time to kind of look inside. And a lot of people took advantage of that and are really in a much better position now. But it's not too late to do that. And when we get to the end of the year, end of any year, it's always a good time to kind of look back and say, hey, what did I accomplish this year? Did I really accomplish the goals I set out for myself? What was my New Year's resolution last year? Because the year, those 12 months takes a while. And if you have a resolution, so many of them fall by the wayside, whether it's a gym membership or learning a new language or losing weight or whatever it is. A lot of times we start out fast and then we fizzle out. So think about heading towards 2023, what you want to accomplish with yourself, what are some goals that you have, and what's the mindset you want to have, and get into that now. Don't wait until 2023 to boom, I'm going to go to the gym. Start now. Get a head start, get a run up to it. And trust me, it really works. I remember when I trained for my first marathon, I went out for a run and I was listening to the broadcast of the New York City Marathon on the radio. And while I was running, and I said to myself, I'm going to train a whole year for the marathon. Now, marathon training, a lot of times it's just 3 months. You put through a very tight protocol. I said, you know what? I want to put the foundation of the miles in there. I want a whole year of really leading up to this marathon. And I trained for a year, and you know what? It was a great decision for myself, because once I got to the marathon, I was in really, really good shape. I wasn't concerned about not finishing. Even though it was, it's 26 miles. I had run the 20 a couple of times. The bottom line is I prepared for an entire year. So you don't have to wait until New Year's to make a resolution for yourself or think about what you want to accomplish next year. So time to get on it is now, and it's also time to really enjoy family and be full of gratitude for the things we have. And we have a lot more, each individual person out there, including myself, we have a lot more than we sometimes realize or look back on and say, hey, you know what? I've got a roof over my head. I've got warm water. I've got a family. Whatever you have, and everybody has different stuff. There's things to be thankful for. So just keep it in mind. So Guys Radio, we're going to talk about dreams and nightmares today. Our special guest is J.M. DeBoard. So let's get into it right now.
It's Guys Radio.
Okay, Guys Radio, we've got a wonderful guest today. We're going to talk about something that everybody experiences out there, and that's called nightmares, dreams and nightmares. My special guest is J.M. DeBoard. He is a dream expert. He wrote that seminal book, The Dream Interpretation Dictionary, Symbols, Signs, and Meanings. He's been on the show a few times in the past. He's one of my early guests beyond the kind of relationship area where Guys Radio began. And I wanted to get JM back here because he's got a new book, and it's called Nightmares, Your Guide to Interpreting Your Darkest Dreams. And we've all had those. I remember as a kid, I had a dream about there was this small entity. It was like a little human being, but he was an adult, but he was small, and he looked like Alfred E. Newman from Mad Magazine. And he would jump up on me in bed and start choking me. And it paralyzed me with fear. And I had that dream about 3 or 4 times, and I told my parents about it. And I can't recall what they told me, but basically the next time that happened, I turned the tables and I kind of squashed this entity, if you will, and it never came back again. But as I was reading Jim's book, I could see that these are things that happen to all of us. And Jim has a really cool story that we'll get into about how he was haunted for many, many years, even decades, from a nightmare and from an entity. So let me tell you a little bit about Jim, and we'll get him out here right now. He's a resident dream expert at Reddit.com. He's appeared as a featured dream expert, dream interpreter on numerous media programs, including Coast to Coast AM, George Norrie's show, Darkness Radio, The Moore Show, and of course, Guys Radio. He's touched millions with his insights and answers, gaining him international acclaim for his ability to demystify dreams and their interpretation. He's a cool guy. He's coming to us from Arizona. Welcome back to Guys Radio, JM Jim DeBoard. How are you, Jim?
Hey, JM. It's great, Robert. Thank you for having me back on your show and to talk about a subject that I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to. And hopefully we can give them some insight today that the next time they have a nightmare, they will understand what it is